Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mack. Joining me today in place of Corey is Cleveland Cavaliers beat writer for The Athletic, Kelsey Russo. Kelsey, first off, I just want to say thanks for joining the show on such short notice. And secondly, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Well, after that recent snafu, I'm doing quite good. For the listeners out there, I literally forgot to press record on this episode. I hope you guys get a chuckle out of that. As of recording the episode itself, though, we're about 24 hours away from the NBA trade deadline, and the Cavaliers have stood pat, much to the chagrin of some Cavs fans out there. And frankly, I am in agreement with it. I love it. I've been saying this for a while now. The team does not truly need a trade just to make a trade. They have a pretty solid group of guys when you think about Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen in the starting five. And then they are flanked by Ricky Rubio, Karis LeVert, Jetty Osman, Dean Wade, Kevin Love, and so on. That's what the Cavs are working with now that they have everybody back, with the exclusion of Dylan Windler. That, to me, speaks volumes about the level of talent that we have here, that you have some of these guys on the bench, especially when you consider the collective talent here at the top. So with that being the case, you recently penned an article on this topic and cited numerous reasons why the Cavs may just want to stand pat at the deadline. Can you elaborate on a few of those for our listeners who may not have had the pleasure of reading that piece just yet?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the potential trades that are out there would require first round picks, and the Cavs don't have any of those available. They traded a bunch of them when they made the trade for Donovan, so they don't have that kind of ability to sweeten a deal like maybe other teams could. So I think that's kind of the main thing. Secondly, like kind of like you touched on, like they're finally fully or almost fully healthy, and they've been able to see recently what these rotations look like, what these lineups can look like, and how they can work together. And I think that was really what was missing in the first part of the season. But we've seen Isaac Okoro really succeed at the three. Like we've known what he can do defensively, but the threes are starting to fall. He's confident in taking those shots. Karis LeVert coming off the bench adds like that scoring to that group. You just have options there. Having Dean Wade back as well, like so not only do you have size, but you have the spacing. He can shoot the three as well, and so like you have options depending on different matchups that can honestly fill that space. And I think like I understand where fans are coming from, but I think we also have to keep in mind of like the Cavs made their really big trade when they traded for Donovan Mitchell. That was the big thing, obviously. Bringing in an all-star, but and the picks that were included, the guys that were included in that trade. So you've had this kind of first part of the season to allow that to play out, see how it makes them better. But I just didn't think, still don't think there's really a need to go and change things up right now because they are finally in a rhythm. They're seeing what they look like as a healthy group, and they can ride this out through the rest of the season. And still keep their goals in mind, and those playoff aspirations are still really attainable. So I think they should just stand pat. That's as a personal opinion.
I'm literally right there with you, and I think like the honest evaluation of this team heading into the season was that this is going to take some time. The Donovan Mitchell trade was not going to fix everything, all the issues that we had in one season. It was not going to be title right away after making the playing game. Frankly speaking, that just was never going to happen, especially when you consider the dynamics of how everything shifted. You gave up Lowry Markkanen, a player who gave us so many fun tall ball lineups out there in his one season in Cleveland. You moved on from Colin Sexton, who many people felt that the Cavs probably could have got on a cheaper version, a less expensive deal than a Donovan Mitchell. But we've clearly seen that this has worked out for everybody. Just specifically speaking in regards to expectations for this season, I think the Cavs headed in knowing that they wanted to go in and get some playoff experience for a lot of these guys who've never been there. You do have some playoff experience on the roster, but by and large, many of these guys are very young. They've never been in that type of atmosphere, and it's important to get that. So it was going to be steps. And so obviously these things are fluid. They change. They tend to change, during the course of a season. But I still wouldn't hesitate to say it's not title or bust yet. And I think people just need to stand, have that mentality.
Yeah, and I think so. I kind of going back to Kobe Allman's comments during one media day, but also Donovan's like introductory press conference. He kind of reiterated that point of like, this isn't a contention year or bust, or title year or bust. Like, they want to build this thing. And I mean, I get the excitement from Cavs fans of like, oh my gosh, we just made this trade for this all-star caliber player. Like, we're going to shoot up. But I think the thing we also have to keep in mind is how tight the East is and the teams that are above the Cavs at the moment. You think about the Bucks, the Celtics, the Sixers. I mean, the Nets are in this mix. The Cavs, like, there are this group at the top of the Eastern Conference is so close, and there's so much talent. And you have defending champions and finals, teams and all these things that it's going to be a difficult kind of race. And so I just think getting to the playoffs, experiencing that, like you said, because, Darius doesn't have playoff experience. Evan, Isaac, as a group, they don't have experience together. And I think that's another necessary aspect of it, of like, guys have experience, but then it's different playing as a unit in one piece. So I think that experience is really crucial for them. So the first round really is like, that's kind of where that expectation is. And then to grow it, like you said, there's kind of a trajectory here of, okay, we make these adjustments, we see how this plays out, and then we continue to build on it. But again, I do get where the excitement comes from fans, but I was like, we need to tame some expectations a little bit and just sort of like reel it back in of, let's remember where this team was last year. And just kind of the jumps they've continued to make, but they're not going to skip those steps because it's not going to be sustainable if they do.
That's that's the sane way to view it. That's how people who are logical view it. But as fans, we're illogical sometimes. And there's a human element to this. Like you like you said, you acquire such a big name like a Donovan Mitchell, and you're immediately thinking, well, this is going to vault us to the top of the Eastern Conference. And to keep in mind the fact that the teams that are ahead of the Cavs right now in the standings at 34-22, and even that, and then that's an accomplishment in my opinion in itself, being 34-22 in such a stacked Eastern Conference when you had so much upheaval and transition to this conference in the offseason. The teams that are in front of the Cavs right now, the Boston Celtics, literally just got out of the finals and have some of the best players in the NBA right now. The Milwaukee Bucks have an MVP caliber player in Giannis Antetokounmpo and have built around him very well. And you have the Philadelphia 76ers who are right there too. They're another team who, with Joel Embiid and James Harden and company, have title aspirations themselves. So this is by no means been a walk in the park. And to get to 34 wins through 56, I believe, that's a pretty good mark. If you were to tell me that with the amount of talent in this conference to begin the season that they would be here right now, I'd be perfectly acceptable of that. Because this time last year, if you told me that their record would be 34-22, I'd be like, no, just you got to be on something. And I count myself amongst one of the most positive, one of the most optimistic views out there in regards to Cleveland. But go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that of like, in a sense of not only 34 wins, they've had 19 different starting lineups like this season, which is just crazy. Of like, you've dealt with a lot of injuries as well and just different things changing. So, I think similar time last year, they had the same amount of wins. I remember seeing that on Twitter, but people were like, why are we not at a better spot? But I think we have to keep in mind of this, bigger perspective of this season that like the Cavs have dealt with a lot of injuries and just changing different lineups. So they're still in a good space. They believe they're in a good space. And they it's just kind of focusing on this group here and moving forward. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any concern in the sense of where they're at the moment. With 34 wins is pretty good at this point in the season. I think there's 7-8 teams that have 30 plus wins. So like for them to be one of those teams, I think is a pretty good thing as well.
Yeah, you're spot on there. Most of them are in the East. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it's just it's just one of those things. Like the lineup has not been consistent this season yet. They have won many games, and a lot of people like to really crap on JB Bickerstaff about that. But I think you got to kind of cut him a little bit of slack, considering the constant transition that he's had to deal with. It's just been a joy to watch this team kind of make do with what they have and pull through. They're quite young. They're not always gonna, win games. That it's a learning. It's a period of learning for all of them. You can take something away from each one of these losses as you can in the wins. And specifically referring to that in regards to development, you already referred to it earlier. Isaac Okoro, man. He's had somewhat of a bumpy ride to start out his career, hasn't he?
Yes.
Went from starting all 67 games that he appeared in his rookie season alongside Garland and former Cavalier Sexton, with the primary goal perhaps being to add some semblance of perimeter defense, to the following season being moved to the bench for Lauri Markkanen in a move that seemed puzzling, at least in my vision, at the time, but ultimately worked out, right?
Yeah.
And then we fast forward to this season after the Mitchell trade shakes things up and set up Isaac to potentially start once more, only to lose the starting job to Karis LeVert to begin the season. And a bunch of stuff has happened since then. You've had Dean Wade miss a significant chunk of games. Lamar Stevens got his shot before exiting due to an injury, which once again opened the door for Okoro to earn the job. And so far, he's taken it. And you pointed this out in your article earlier. But, since January 1st, the guy is averaging nearly 9 points. He's completing a blistering 58.1% of his total field goal attempts, which includes, and this is the most important part, 51% from three-point range. That's a stretch of 19 games and pretty much almost a fourth of the season. So with all that being said, what has impressed you the most about Okoro since he's been reinserted into the starting lineup?
Yeah, I think it's his confidence, because we know what he's been able to do since he got here as a defender. He consistently has put on some of the top guards on a nightly basis and has been able to contest shots or lock them down or just kind of make things really difficult on the defensive end of the floor. But offensively, early on, he was more so getting out in transition, cutting to the basket, kind of doing those sort of things. But this offseason, he did a ton of work on his three-point shot, and was working with Coach Andrew Olson, and they just did a ton of work on it. So I think what we've seen, though, is now that he has the opportunities, it's the confidence because they're continuing to go in. He's taking them in clutch moments, when he's not hesitating. He used to he'd be in the corners and then he would hesitate and pass it off to somebody else. Now, if he gets the ball, he normally takes it. And I think that's a really good thing if he's just seeing those opportunities that are there on the floor for him and taking them. And I think it's just, I really think it's just a confidence thing for him of once you start to see those shots fall, you're like, all right, the work that I've put in, I can do this and it's paying off and the guys have talked about it a ton. He is the first person in the gym every morning. Donovan tries to beat him into the gym and he normally doesn't beat him. It's usually Isaac is there first thing in the morning. He stays afterwards, working on shots. So it's there's a ton of dedication from him to make this a part of his game and to be more of that two-way player of being really effective on both ends of the floor. And I think we've been starting to see that really pay off for him. And just finding those moments too, because I think what kind of sometimes gets lost in all of this is, that starting lineup has Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, two really big scorers. Obviously, you're getting Evan and Jarrett involved, so there's not a ton.
Where's the touches?
Exactly. There's one ball. There's only so many touches. So because some people are well, he only scores not always in double figures or whatever. But I'm but the shots that he is getting, he's taking and he's knocking them down. And so I think that's the thing is it doesn't necessarily have to be 15, 20 points a night kind of thing for him, but it's taking advantage of those opportunities and being able to knock down those shots in those moments because then the defenses have to watch out for him. Usually they kind of try to load up on Darius or Donovan. So that leaves Isaac open. And that's that they have taken advantage of that. And so I think that's what we've seen. And I think like there's just an overall, like I said this earlier, but overall confidence from everybody. So not only him, but the coaching staff, his teammates, and it's really starting to pay off. So it's been a good month for him.
It really has. When Isaac is playing well, it seems like everybody's playing well.
Yeah.
Like the confidence out there when he's making shots, you just got a good feeling about the game. So at least that's how I see it. You know, I was having a pretty brief conversation with somebody about this the other day. It's just like, well, people are complaining that he's still not drawing the defense's attention. And I'm like, that's not necessarily a bad thing if he's still making the shot. Like once they do begin to actually start, once he does start to pull them out there, it draws the attention away from those double teams that you indicated. And it allows him to do one of two things. He can attack the basket, which he is very good at. He's always been good at, and he can draw fouls doing that. And just like we saw against Washington the other day, a game that I had the pleasure of being at, he took a jab step and put the shot up. It's not something that you're accustomed to seeing Okoro do from the perimeter. When you see him doing that, you know he has his full set of confidence, and the team is right there behind him. Everybody wants this guy to succeed, and it's been a work in progress for him. And I think lost in all this is that, again, these guys are so young. Like we live in a society where like everybody wants things instantly. It's all instant gratification now. And I don't know if that's just because of the generation that we live in these days, or if that's something that's always been the case. But it just nowadays, it seems like if you're not a star out of the gate, if you're not somebody who excels at something like on a very high level, fans tend to turn their backs on you a little bit quicker than they should.
Yeah.
And I love seeing him be successful in this way. And I hope it continues. I think putting him in that starting lineup was probably the best thing that you could have done for him, because I think it really makes it allows him to use his capabilities to the fullest. As you indicated, with the backcourt the way it is, with the other two front court mates that he has, the touches are not going to be there that often. So as long as he's efficient with the looks that he's given, and he is able to start pulling those defenders out, I got no complaints for him, because you know what this guy can do on the defensive side of the ball. And our buddy Carter Rodriguez actually pointed this out from an article that Chris Fedor put out. You know what the guy can do on the defensive end. So far this season, held Drew Holiday to 4 points on 2 of 10 shooting, Jalen Brunson 7 on 2 of 11, Ja Morant 6 points on 2 of 10, and on and on. So you know what this guy can do on the defensive side of the ball. I'm just hoping that offensively this is here to stay.
Yeah. And I think it is, because I think we also kind of saw some of this last year at the end of the season. There was that little bit of stretch where he was scoring, like he had a couple of 20-point plus nights. And I think it was kind of an eye-opening thing of, he's been so defensive minded his whole life. Like that's just been who he is. And so through this kind of process, and like last year into this year, like the coaching staff has been like, we can grow his game in this way, and this is how we do it. So, but again, he's a 3rd-year player. So 2 years, 3 years, 3 years. I always mix them up. There's like too many of them. But like 3rd year, there's been a lot of change through his 3 years in the league, and so I just think there was a room for growth, obviously, but they've taken advantage of it, and now we're seeing all of that pay off. So I think, again, and guys go through ups and downs, but I would expect this to be something that sticks for him.
Man, I hope so. If it does, the Cavs are in great shape. We might not be talking trades.
Yeah.
At least like a big time move in the coming season or two. But with that being the case, another guy who came into the season with like very extremely high expectations levied upon him was one Evan Mobley. Whether it was talk of him finishing as a Defensive Player of the Year finalist or making an all-star leap, the expectations for this guy were through the roof. And I think the assumption was that some of those expectations would immediately shift, specifically on the offensive end with the addition of Mitchell. And that's kind of been the case.
Mhm.
Mobley's touches are slightly down from last season, going from 12 field goal attempts per game to 11.4. But the crazy part is he's actually putting up a higher points per game average because he's been more efficient with the looks he's been given.
Mhm.
Mobley's currently at 55.3% from the field compared to last season's 50.8. That's a pretty substantial jump. So, with that in mind, based off of what you've seen from Mobley so far this season, are you okay with him kind of taking the back seat to the front court for right now? Because I've seen many fans suggest that in order for Cleveland to reach its like apex, he would likely need to be at least the second option most nights.
So yeah, so it's an interesting conversation because at like early on in the season, Jamie had talked about how like for the Cavs to get to where they want to go, like Evan is going to be their guy, like that guy. He can take them where they want to go, but I don't necessarily think that means he has to be the top scorer, the second option behind Donovan, kind of thing. Evan's mindset is so in the realm of like doing whatever is best for the team in order to win. And like that sounds obviously very cliche, but we've seen him make the extra pass, like, make the hockey assist, or like he's in the paint taking up space so then guys don't try to get into the paint to go to the rim. Like he finds ways to affect the game positively on both ends of the floor that aren't going to be in points all the time, and it's either like it's a rebound on either end of the floor. It's just like different little things. But I think to your point of, because that was a big thing of like, okay, is his offensive production down? And like, while the attempts are, but it's like, but he has been more efficient because there's a confidence factor there. He's more confident to take those shots. He's more confident in getting to the basket, to the rim, and like just kind of using his body to do so. He's also been working on his 3-point shot and that confidence there to take that in really clutch moments, and he's super effective in fourth quarters. Like they have a nickname for him. They call him fourth quarter Ev. And so he finds a way to turn it on in the fourth quarter, and whatever that is, if either it's more physically defensively, if that's finding ways offensively to either score or help guys get open, kind of thing. Like he just sort of finds those little ways to affect the game positively. So I personally think his production's fine. Like again, there was so many, like those 5 guys on the floor, the touches they're spread out between all of them. So him being an option is really important, and they have to find him his opportunities, obviously. But I think there's a way to balance this all out where he is effective in his minutes. He's effective in the way that they need him to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be and always like going to getting to the basket, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. For me, like the one gripe that I have seen people have is like, stop being so hesitant to take the three when
Yeah.
he gets it. Because there's been a couple possessions when Donovan or Darius will kick it out to him and he'll hesitate for a slight moment, which
Yeah.
completely throws his shot and his form off. And that's really been the only sour spot for me. He's at 19% from 3-point range, but even with that being the case, he's still being really, really efficient. So, do you think if Mobley never truly develops like a consistent 3-point shot, you'll be okay with that, just with what he's able to do in other areas?
That's a good question. It's funny because I've had like conversations with some of the coaching staff, and like they see that as like if they develop his 3-point shot, like he's at a whole other level. Like that's what's going to take him to just a completely different place. So I think it is something that does need to be developed, but I don't think it needs to be something that's you know fully developed this season, or they can take the time to kind of build this out, because and again, he's somebody that like I feel like we have to keep this in mind if it's just his second year. He's a year and a half in the league, like he's still really young, and so there is this room for development for him. And if that's kind of their focus, there's an opportunity to really grow that. So but I think there's a lot of potential there for him to grow that in his game. Again, it's the confidence factor, to not hesitate to take those shots when you have them, to not like just kind of not think twice about it. And so I think if he can get there, that's going to be really crucial for him just kind of taking that like next leap, I guess.
That's where I'm at. And this guy does so much, and he's so young. I think that the sky is the limit for him, as cliche as it sounds. This is that's I mean, they're cliches for a reason, right?
Exactly.
They apply to so many different things. Let's move to the bench here really quickly. So one of the guys who really, frankly, most of the trade talk has been surrounding is Karis LeVert.
Hmm.
This is a guy who has ties, to Ohio, very, very well liked, in Cleveland and whatnot, but hasn't always seemed to mesh well in specific lineups. So one would think, at least in my estimation, if they're not able to move Levert, that usually is either going to mean one of two things. Either they are not able to find a suitor for him that they clearly felt that the deal made sense, or they may plan on attempting to re-sign him.
Hmm.
So with that being the case, when you have a Ricky Rubio on the team, when you have a Darius Garland, a Donovan Mitchell, where do you see Karis LeVert's role actually playing out here now that everybody's healthy? Because you still at least would probably like to give Jetty Osman some minutes, which kind of eats into that too. And
Hmm.
Dean Wade's right in there as well. So where do you see Karis LeVert's role being moving forward now that everybody is healthy?
Yeah, I think coming off the bench has been a really good thing for him, because he's been able to like find his touches, and that was kind of the thing that was sort of the issue in the starting lineup, because you had Donovan, Darius, and Karis, everybody trying to get touches, and so Karis was struggling to find a rhythm. So I think for him coming off the bench in that second unit, either playing next to Ricky or playing next to a combination of like Donovan or Darius, allows him to find his rhythm, get his touches, find his shots. And then as the game goes on, he can play in those moments like down the stretch kind of thing. I think that's sort of where his role is. I don't think it really changes a ton with Ricky back, because Ricky's going to be the facilitator, that second point guard, or the point guard in the second unit, and like kind of, be that orchestrator. He can find Karis his opportunities on the floor, and Karis can go look for his shots. And I think that's sort of how that dynamic can work really well. And then you can, use Jetty or Dean at the three more so, and kind of leave Karis at the two, and sort of be that shooting guard kind of role. So I think there's a place for him. I think his talent is there. We've seen in moments where he can go get, he finds those shots. I think a lot of it for him was the rhythm aspect, and just being able to like, if you're not in a rhythm from, by the end of like towards the end of the game, it's really hard to get into one. And so kind of getting him those opportunities early has allowed him to keep that rhythm, find it, and so sort of be able to succeed, like in third, fourth quarters, etc. So I think that's kind of how I see his role. And I think, he's comfortable with that role. Like he was part of that conversation, like when they decided to move him out of the starting lineup, like he went to JB and they had a conversation about it of like, hey, like I think this is actually like I'm more suited for this, because like I'm not getting those touches, and like not in a selfish way, but just like like, hey, like I'm not able to find a rhythm. I mean, because you have, Darius Donovan in that starting lineup.
No,
So
he walked up in the office and said, "I want the ball. I want some touches.
give it to
Give me
me.
the ball."
Yeah. So I think like just kind of that understanding again to like do what's necessary for this group, has allowed him to like find his place. And I think it fits for him. Like I think it works. So
Yeah, I'm really hoping so. He's another guy like Okoro that I really want him to succeed.
yeah.
I would not like to see Karis LeVert go, whether he's traded or not re-signed. I would like this guy to remain with the team, but at the end of the day, it's all about the fit and whatnot. And so for me, I'm sitting here wondering like the minutes. How is this distribution going to work out? I know that recently Kevin Love, a lot of talks have centered around him kind of being moved to more of a matchup based kind of conversation with him. So his minutes are going to be sporadic, but in that second unit, when you do have a Jetty, when you do have Rubio, when you have Dean, Lamar, a whole bunch of a ton of players who are vying for minutes. I'm wondering if it's going to be fluctuating for all of these guys from game to game. because one of the things that I think that we have both seen at this to start the season is that the minutes for the starters are extremely high,
Yeah.
especially Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and you want to get those lowered. So I think like it's possible to do that and keep everybody happy, but that's on JB, and it's not a job that I envy.
Yeah.
But one of
Yeah.
the as I'm sure you can attest to, one of the things that we've come to know about JB is that he is very much a player's coach, and he knows how to have those tough conversations with these guys, and it's one of his best attributes as a coach. So moving forward, I guess to tie all this in together, when you have a guy like Kevin Love, who has been transitioned to kind of being the odd man out, I mean, not really going to sugarcoat it here.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of plays a role in chemistry for the rest of the team? Do you think him stepping aside and saying, hey, you know what, I'm okay with accepting this fact of not necessarily being a regular rotation member, do you think that has like a positive impact on the rest of the guys? Like he's taking one for the team?
I think so, because I think it honestly even goes back to last season in that aspect when, when they drafted Evan, they knew, and they had Lowry. They were like, they had a conversation with Kevin about how he was going to come off the bench because they were going to start this, their first round pick and allow Evan to grow at the 4. And Kevin was very accepting of that role. It was like a hard conversation, obviously, but it was an acceptance of my minutes are going to be lower, but at the same time, it allowed him to play in every game other than when he missed that stint for being in the health and safety protocols. And JB talked about a ton last year how like his willingness to sacrifice that, because Kevin has, been to the mountaintop, has a championship, has seen everything with this organization that you could possibly imagine, that to step back in that role, like allowed JB to ask whatever of all the other guys because Kevin was making this major sacrifice. And I think fast forward to this year, it's a similar kind of situation of, okay, you have this NBA champion, you have this guy that's been in the league for a while, he's been with the Cavs for a very long time, and now he's stepping back even farther to allow guys to succeed. And not that it's not easy, obviously, but I think it allows there's an understanding of the sacrifice of that, and guys really respect that. They really do like appreciate Kevin's veteran leadership, his presence. Like they taught he brings a lot in that aspect, and I think we can't forget about that. But so it's like still his presence on the bench is really important because he sees things, he's been through situations, he can help guys as they go through this, like trying to get to the playoffs and a playoff experience or playoff run and what that experience is like. But I think it allows, it builds that chemistry in a sense of like, okay, he's taking this role change. So now we're going to go try to succeed for him basically. So, but again, it doesn't make it easy because obviously he's a competitor player. Yeah. But I think there's like an understanding, and his relationship with JB is really important in all of this as well. So like the honesty, the transparency in those conversations has been a factor in all of it as well, of just like you said, JB is very much a player's coach. And they have very honest and real conversations, which I think is really important, especially in situations like this where it can either be matchup based or it can end up being guys' roles change, and being able to understand all of the elements is really important for guys, and they do that really, really well.
Absolutely. And I have not always been a fan of some of the antics that Kevin Love has brought to the
Yeah.
table over the past couple of seasons. But I gotta say, dating back to last season when he was finally willing to accept the role that was given to him, and he took it in stride and nearly won the Sixth Man of the Year. I think many of us feel like he should have. But this season, obviously not so much the case because of some of the mounting injuries that he's had to deal with and just pure circumstance for him, which unfortunately can be the case a lot of the times. It's, when your opportunity is there and you haven't made the most out of it, or you get injured and somebody else fills in for you and takes it, sometimes that's just the case. And right now, that's kind of the predicament that he finds himself in. Time will tell what the Cavs end up doing with Kevin past this season, because as we all know, his contract will be expiring. I'd love to see him back on a short-term deal, something that works for both sides. But again, time will tell if that happens. Before I get you out of here, Kelsey, I do have to ask, us being, two Cavalier fans here, as I'm sure everybody watched last night, LeBron James getting that record, 11 seasons in Cleveland, a few seasons now in Los Angeles, and then the stint in Miami where he won his first championship. Do you see anybody ever actually topping his record? Because he's still going. He's still going.
Like, I think that's the thing, is it's, he's just going to continue breaking his own record until he retires, I guess. I don't know. And I don't think so, because he's such a generational player. Like, he is just kind of in his own little category, and
he's taking such good care of his body. Like, nobody does that. Like
exactly. Yeah. And even even as the game's changing and everything, because I thought it was interesting. I did not know this, that Kareem had only made, was it 1 3, 2 3, something like that, in his career, for his scoring number. I thought that was crazy. So obviously the game has changed, but I just think the longevity of LeBron's career, what he's been able to do on a nightly basis, through not only when he was younger, but seriously even till now, when he's scoring 30 plus very frequently, and so I don't think it's going to be topped, at least for maybe a really long time, but till the next generational guy. But it was so cool to watch. I mean, I thought it was funny though, and I guess it makes sense because they did it for when Steph broke the 3-point record, but when they stopped the game with 10 seconds left in the third quarter, I was like, what happened?
You just don't see that happen. Yeah.
I know. Full stop of the game, full little ceremony. I was like, do you just want to play the last 10 seconds and then you can I don't know. It just was really funny to me of the whole circumstance, but it was very cool to watch and witness it, and kind of just think about I don't know. I was in high school when they won the championship here in Cleveland. So it's just really cool to see all these kind of different moments in history. So it was pretty special to watch.
It was. I us being on the East Coast and whatnot. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I tried my best. I was in and out of sleep. I watched the amazing third quarter. I watched the first. I think I missed the partial bit of the second because I just fallen asleep. But with these West Coast times so late, but it was awesome sight to see, because you just don't get to see this stuff every day. You pointed out the Steph breaking the record. These are records that are not broken every day. Every day. It's just one of those things you have to watch it. It's appointment viewing. And I think when we look back on LeBron's career, we're just going to be at all in the fact that this guy is going to be top 5 or top 10 in pretty much all categories. And that is insane for anybody to have had that period of longevity and still kind of appearing to be in somewhat of a prime for him. He's obviously exiting it, but at 38 years old and still doing it at a higher level than a lot of other star players, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it is. I honestly sometimes forget that he's 38. Last night I was like, oh my God. I had to remind myself. I was like, he is 38. He's, he's not 22 like some of these other guys. And it's just unbelievable. Sometimes you watch the things that he does. And I just thought it was really funny too that he hit that shot to break it on the fadeaway. I was like, it's just classic, just a surreal moment. So I thought that was really cool.
Absolutely. No other word to put out there than incredible for him. Such an iconic player. We were very spoiled to have him for parts of 11 seasons. So, and a championship. Can't leave that out. So with that being said, Kelsey, again, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. As we always tell you guys, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can directly at It's Cavalier _pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you'd like to be added to the exclusive It's Cavalier Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review to itscavalier53@gmail.com, and we'll send you an invite. That said, go Cavs.